So welcome to everybody. Welcome to the presentation of Professor Bernhard Standl. It's really a pleasure to have you here in Klagenfurt. Professor Bernhard Standl is a tenure-track professor in informatics education at the Karlsruhe University of Education. And in his bio, he mentions that his research focuses on modeling teaching concepts as pedagogical design patterns and on the data-driven identification of effective teaching learning scenarios and their reuse in practice. Honestly, we know each other now for more than 6 years, and you have already been here in Klagenfurt talking about design and teaching patterns, and I'm really curious about your presentation. So I would say the floor is yours, and how do you want to handle it when there are questions? Should we interrupt you or should we wait until the end of the presentation?
Okay, the first question is, I assume the presentation will be in English, right? Yeah.
As
it can be in
as
English,
you prefer.
yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know that, but it's fine. No, I think that's fine. So,
okay.
And interrupting questions are fine anytime. So
okay.
Just feel free if you have questions to interrupt me. I will be happy to answer it.
Okay, so the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your nice introduction. And thank you very much for inviting me to Klagenfurt. And it's not just me, I brought my team with me actually here to Klagenfurt, because we thought, appointment in July in Kärnten is such a nice opportunity to go to Kärnten and spend some time here. So thank you. Today, I would like to talk about a data-driven identification of teaching patterns, and as Andreas mentioned before, patterns actually are part of my work for quite a while now. I wrote my PhD thesis on patterns, and since then, actually, I'm working on this topic in the context of education and computer science education. First of all, I would like to mention some words where we actually come from. We are from Karlsruhe. This is the Pädagogische Hochschule Karlsruhe, the Karlsruhe University of Education. The PH Karlsruhe is actually a university with the right to write a PhD thesis and habilitation. So we are kind of a special sort of university. And the university is wholly dedicated to educate future teachers in different subjects. And the subject computer science was introduced in 2018-19 when I was appointed to the chair of computer science didactics there. Most of you probably will know where Karlsruhe is. Karlsruhe is like in the southern western part of Germany, very close to France. It's also a good opportunity for us to go to France very quickly. But we are also, if even Karlsruhe is quite here in the western part of Germany, it's very good connected actually with trains to the south and to Freiburg, Frankfurt, Stuttgart and Munich and so on. But it's still quite a long ride if I frequently go home to Austria, of course, no? And it's always a long ride from Styria, from Vienna to Munich and western to Karlsruhe. But Karlsruhe is all worth it for a visit. It's a beautiful palace. And the interesting thing in Karlsruhe is that it's like a planned city, and it's like in a star, in a Fächerstadt, no? It's like a star, no? And it's planned from there, from the palace out. There are the roads going through the city. So it's a nice place. And I also already mentioned I brought my team with me, and you can see them here, but also here, no? So because not all of them were able to join us today. Some Manuela Adrigan, for example, she's actually from Tyrol and part of our team. And who else? Stefan Weber is also not here. He's all part of the Indico project we are working on. And why I'm showing my team here, because most parts of the work we are working together on it. Now, the things I'm presenting here is like are results of our collaborative work in our department. So I'm very happy to have such a great team in my department. So let's come to the topic. So teaching patterns. What are the motivation to deal with teaching patterns, to find best practices in teaching and find a way to describe them so they are reusable in other teaching contexts. And so the basement we are researching on finding teaching patterns is to see what actually makes a good teaching pattern for us, what is this, the fundamental idea of a good teaching pattern. And there, of course, we go to see a good teaching pattern is there where good teaching takes place. And so we have to focus on teaching patterns where good teaching takes place. And this is like a leading thing we are following. And the next thing is, if you look at teaching patterns, to find teaching patterns in teaching is how can we collect teaching patterns from the teaching field. And there we develop the idea we have to make like a structure of the field, of the domain where teaching takes place. And to describe the structure, we develop a taxonomy where we map the structure of a domain, what are relevant aspects of teaching in this domain, into a hierarchical taxonomy. And then once we have collected these teaching patterns along this taxonomy in a database, where we come later to this database, is the question, okay, now we have collected the data of teaching, of good practices, along the principles of good teaching. How can we then identify such good practices in the collected data? And then we come to the pattern mining aspect, where we are not so far by now, but we have developed first ideas how we can get data from there. Before we come to the all data thing on patterns, I would like to go a little into the pattern idea, what a pattern is. Most of you probably from the computer science background came across patterns somehow. And the patterns idea is like three leading questions. What are patterns? How to identify patterns? This is the pattern mining aspect, and then maybe the most important thing, because this is why we are doing this actually, how to bring the patterns then back into practice, because it's not only to collect the patterns and to see, oh, that's our good practice and now we have collected them. The thing is to make them reusable and bring it back to the practice. The initial idea of the pattern was like from Christoph Alexander, who wrote in the 70s in the field of architecture the book on patterns and a pattern language, and he called it a pattern language, where he tried to find I think I was like 200 or 300 different patterns in a hierarchical structure to describe how good living takes place in a city and how has the city to be planned from a more large scale idea to city planning back down to like the idea how is like the structure of how looks the structure of a house like, where are the windows, or what is the direction of a living room, for example, in where should the living room be placed into a house. No? And the interesting thing about Alexander's idea is like that he structured each pattern in the same way, basically in these three categories: the problem statement, this description of the process, of the context, how to come to a solution for this problem, and like the description of the solution, enhanced with diagrams and connections. And so important here to understand Alexander's initial ideas that it's not like just a handbook to describe problems and solutions and the way to it. It's more like this idea of Alexander was to describe the problem exactly in a field where the problem really occurs. Because if we go to teaching, for example, if I teach, when we talk about digital technologies where we work on a project in, it's like if I use iPads in lessons, no, there some problem or some challenge in using iPads may happen in this context, but maybe not happen in another context. So it's very important from Alexander's idea to have the right context here, that the pattern fills the gap and tells me what is the most suitable solution here from a best practice to come to a solution. The pattern idea was not only picked up in the field of computer science, but also for a while in the field of education. And for example, here from the University of Hamburg, it's very common that patterns, if they're picked up in the field of education, that they describe just this like handbook-like patterns where they say, okay, if you want to do like some blended learning, here we describe it in the structure of Alexander: problem, solution, and description, and some diagrams with it. And then there's another pattern. But this was not Alexander's idea. Alexander's idea was to interconnect all patterns. The patterns have to be interconnected and enhance each other somehow, to complete each other. And most of the time, even though this pattern ideas in education follow the structure, it does not match the actual idea. Here was actually a picture, but I would try to describe it with words, no? And like this, because what I said here is like that. It was a picture like from like a snapshot from Alexander's book, that where this idea becomes clear that if you for reusing the patterns, if you take the pattern handbook for like where the interconnected patterns are in there, and Alexander calls it a pattern language. If you want to have a solution from this pattern handbook, pick the most suitable pattern you want to start with and go from this pattern further to other patterns who helps you to find a solution. No? And each pattern in Alexander's book has like a connection to other patterns, no? From like higher or lower patterns in this structure. And this is a very important thing. And I tried that in my PhD thesis to describe a pattern network for computer science education, for informatics education, and this is one pattern called theory elaboration. And it's also the structure, of course. I try to use class diagrams to display what's the structure of the patterns, and there are other connections to other patterns as well, and enhanced with examples. So if you imagine what a pattern is, it's really like that, a description in the structure. But as I said, the important thing is like the interconnection to other patterns. And the whole pattern network I developed in my thesis looked then like this. No? Here is some patterns missing, here some below that, but here if you do on, for example, in assessment, no? Is like the top pattern is like the assessment pattern, where this is described what is this assessment carried out like. And you maybe ask yourself now, okay, assessment, there are many different ways to carry out assessment. And this was also one thing from Alexander. You have to have an overall idea what your pattern network follows on, a shared vision for that, what your pattern network is for. And the leading vision for this pattern network was like the student-centered approach in computer science education. And this follows also in this assessment. And here you see in the lower patterns, for example, learning contract is a very typical thing you carry out in student-centered computer science education, and so on. No? And these patterns here, lower patterns here, are an enhancement from the assessment patterns. They're completed, let's say. So let's go a step further to the data-driven pattern identification. We've found out that actually this pattern thing is also an issue not for education, computer science and so on, but also in the field of digital humanities. And we found out that, for example, at the University of Stuttgart, they tried to use the pattern thing, interesting thing, a combination of computer science department and the social science department, to see how pattern mining can be systematically take place in the field of, for example, here in the movie. That the topic here was that they tried to collect from Western movies like the cowboys and the actors are wearing, like what kind of shirt, what kind of trousers, what kind of hat and shoes and so on. And they collected all this data in a database. And the other side, they characterize it like the type of the actor. Like they said, this is the clothes are the clothes of the bad guy, and then they described the clothes and matched it. This is a bad guy, and this they did this with like a couple of hundred Western movies, and then they tried to do pattern mining in data to see what is a typical thing a bad guy in Western looks like. No? And this is what they used here. What we also tried, we will see it later, to use like an algorithm, like the a priori algorithm, to identify frequent item sets here, for example. And we tried it as well. It's like how usable this is and what like the idea of this is, we will see later. I thought that's actually quite an interesting idea to enhance this. Or to see this from the perspective of teaching again. No? If you say, okay, we also have different paths in teaching. We have here like maybe use of iPads. We have a way how learning takes place, it's organized. We have like the characteristics of a certain teacher. And we also have the empirical validated results of a lecture, which is here we have the cowboy, and here we have the good or bad guy. No? It's the lecture. What's the impact of the lecture? Is it good or bad? Is the impact of the lecture using iPads and problem-based approach, has it a good impact or a bad impact? And this we tried, or we try to identify with different methods, like with questionnaires self-reported of teachers and students, how do they perceive the teaching. But we also do lecture observation, and we do interviews with teachers, and to collect data, to have to get like an impression of that, what happens in this lecture, and then put the data in the database and see if we can find frequent patterns. So, and this emerged as part of the Indico project. Just a few words really quick, not that we see so much models and so on here to avoid the cognitive overload here, but this Indico project at the Karlsruhe University of Education is like part of the project this subject, English, German language, history, economy, math, physics and biology, and all the subjects develop independently of each other digital learning scenarios in their teaching at the university, and we collect from all of them like this teaching data of interviews, questionnaires and observation and so on, and try to identify these patterns, and then the idea is to bring this back to the subjects. So the overall idea of the Indico project from our point of view is like, because there are different other parts, is like that we collect from different subjects, if even history and physics is in the use of digital tools quite different, of course, but maybe they have like similarities in using these iPads. No? We've discussed it last night at the dinner, that the example was if an historian uses iPads in his lessons, it takes place in such a way, in a certain way. And on the other side, the physics teacher also uses iPads, of course, in quite a different way. No? But maybe there is some overlapping in both uses of both using of iPads, where we have like similarities. And this small part of similarities of both subjects using iPads is interesting for us, but this maybe is an indicator for that, to see if there is like maybe a best practice to see where both subjects had good experiences in iPads, and maybe this good experience can also lead to good practices for other subjects. This is the idea. No? But yeah. Another model again to visualize our overall idea of the process is like what we are doing actually here to collect the patterns. We have these lectures in teaching, and we have this taxonomy where we will come in the next couple of slides. Now, the taxonomy is the structure who helps us to see what are relevant parts of teaching we need to capture, no? Because not everything in teaching is required or worthwhile to capture, not just the required things. The idea is that teachers self-report in the web interface the characteristics of their teaching. In this lesson I used iPads and so on, and then I distributed a questionnaire to students who reported how they perceived like these lessons. And so we try to collect them. Currently, we do this like manually. We go to lessons and make observations and so on. In future, this should be happening in a web interface. And this goes in a database, and then we come to the data mining, pattern mining process, where we find these best practices, goes back into another tool, Lesson Builder, and the idea is then that a teacher says, I'm a geography teacher. I have students in the second semester. There's 10 students. They have maybe this experience and they have some other constraints, and the Lesson Builder then sees, okay, use iPads in this way, then you most likely will be successful. This is this high idea we are following. This we try to explore, and then it goes back to practice, and then actually the circle can start from beginning. Here's actually maybe a big problem, because once you get in the system here in bias, for example, no, the bias maybe will get stronger in every circle. No? There's a lot of open questions here. Of course, we are still working on it, and at the moment we are like more in this upper process. No? It's a very complex process to identify all these things. Let's come to the taxonomy, which is Nadine working on actually, like the taxonomy. This is such an important fundamental thing of the pattern idea, because everything like we do in pattern mining, we collect data, depends on the taxonomy. If we have the wrong structure of data, of relevant parts we are collecting data, we will not capture the right things. So we have to be very careful to have like a structure where we collect data in a way that we can be sure that we collect the right data from teaching, and not so much noisy things we maybe not need. And Nadine did this like in a way that first we thought about what such a taxonomy could look like, no? And we made an initial taxonomy and modified it, and then we gave the taxonomy to experts who rated it again, and then we modified again, and then we gave like the terms of the taxonomy to our subjects at the university to assess them the taxonomy from them, to give it to geography, to physics, to biology, to have this subject-related aspect in the taxonomy, to try to readjust it. And then things like in a workshop, consensus validation, and then the final taxonomy. At the moment, we have a kind of a final taxonomy, whereas we are convinced that this is a living thing. No? That is not, there's never a final taxonomy, and the idea is like to have this taxonomy as modeling design back end, and when we some model here different or add here something, the data will map to the database. No? And this is like the idea of the taxonomy. We have on the left-hand side, like all this empirical evaluation. This is the data we collect from the field. How does teaching how is teaching perceived from students, from teachers? And here on the right-hand side, we have all these structural things. How does teaching look like? The teaching method assessment. So here we collect all this teaching structure data. And if you could say, actually, here's the cause and here the impact. I do something like in my teaching with a classroom organization, online project-based, and use peer assessment, and my study plan and curricula looks like that. And then we collect data and empirical data and see it has this impact. And here in between is actually this Spannungsfeld, the Spannungsfeld,
Tension.
the tension, okay. And in this Spannungsfeld, here actually the patterns emerge, somehow, should emerge somehow here, and we will identify it. And what we did from, and Nico did from this taxonomy, modeled a database to be able to begin to start to collect the data. And one student of us, Noah, designed in a bachelor thesis a formula and did some validation on it with like design principles and so on to make sure that this form is really like easy usable for teachers. And in the backend is less like this model database, a data model of from Nico. And this is like the front end to enter the data. You see here, you can like it should. The thing is that it should be very simple to collect data, self-reported data for a teacher, but at the same time, we should collect a lot of data. No? We could, of course, say add every minute of your lecture into the database, like a lesson plan, no? And so on, and upload all your scripts. Then we have covered all. But of course, that's not possible. On the other side, if you collect too low data, we cannot then do like in a reasonable way data mining. No? So it's difficult to find the middle way of it. And I've brought like an example for data mining. Once the data is collected, we do data mining. And we have published this idea. It's just like an artificial idea, not really took place to demonstrate how this data mining with the a priori algorithm could look like. No? We feel like the seminar, it's really just for demonstration reasons here. Using an app, using a mobile device, and here we have the empirical data. For example, the aspect of activation. How students are activated, report themselves as activated in this lesson. And we know in this lesson, for example, in algorithms 2, they used a digital whiteboard brainstorming app, mobile device was used, notebook, and the activation was reported as medium high. No? And to see how can we find patterns here in this table. Therefore, we used like in Python and this association rule module to see, to find out, to use the a priori algorithm with the association rule module to see if there are frequencies can be identified and if and how they can be interpreted. Do they really help us to find patterns? And from the a priori algorithm here, from this small example, for example, you have this like also the cause and the impact, the antecedent and the consequence. So the mentimeter has a consequence of high activation. And in the a priori algorithm, first it's like a multi-step calculation. We first calculate the support, which means how frequent is, for example, the high level of activation visible or occurs here, or is here present in this row, and how frequent the notebook is present. And you can see here once the support for each for the antecedent and the consequent. And the antecedent is always here, and the consequent is here. You can also combine both Padlet and notebook with high. What does this look like? And in the support, like if it is 1, it's very high. And you can see, okay, this is more or less low. You can set up a threshold to see, to leave out lower things. But generally, you cannot really say, it depends on your analysis. You cannot say like everything about 0.5, 0.5 is helpful. It depends on all the other data as well. If the consequent support is 0.5, for example. And then you have here the confidence. This is like the confidence says that in relation to like if you have this high level of notebook here, in which relation does the notebook have in relation to the high the likelihood of being high. No? This is like actually just calculating a likelihood that high takes place 3 times in notebooks. This is calculated in the confidence. And if you look like here in this at this table to see, can we see here a pattern actually, or an indicator for a pattern? We see here very high confidence actually in using Padlets and notebooks. But at the same time, we see here notebook high is here in the support higher than the confidence. Depends on the analysis what kind of conclusions we draw from here. We can for sure say, because Padlet and notebook is high here in confidence but a little low in support, notebook high is higher in support, that the combination, that the use of notebook possibly leads to a good activation. And let's say it's an artificial example. And when I say maybe leads to high activation, you can see from my words that this strategy possibly lead not to patterns, but more like to a hypothesis for patterns. No? You can identify things which are maybe are, but maybe not. And then we are like it's more like a hypothesis generating method to see we have an indicator, or we have like the assumption that a notebook leads to high activation. No? And then with this information, you can go back into the field and have a closer look on it. Okay, we found from all the data we collected that notebooks maybe lead to high activation somehow. No? And then we go back to the field and do not look at the whole field, but just in using notebooks and see if we can prove or reject the hypothesis to see. That's the idea. I know there are different ways for frequent item set checking and so on, but this is just to see our idea where our path could go. Alrighty. Let's come to the end of this presentation. And so what was our goal? The goal was like the collection of good teaching practices for easy reusable integration of teaching. That's the overall goal. And therefore we developed a domain-specific taxonomy to have like this important foundation to build up databases and do data mining it. What like challenges here is like one open thing is still that we have this good arranged mixed method setting of interviews and self-reporting data and so on, but where maybe I mean, in teaching, you know it as teachers, in one teaching lesson, so much things are happening, you never can collect it all, and you never can see everything. You always leave out something in research, and you have to focus on. But if you focus on something in a data collection thing, maybe we leave out some good practices. So we are in the problem thing, like if we focus on something, we can see very clear what's happening, but maybe we forget something. Now we oversee something. No? The data entry of the teachers also, like to make it easy. It's like an upcoming thing. We have to check how this works, no? And the bringing back of the found patterns. Once they're found and the hypothesis is tested, and maybe there's really a pattern for using iPads leads to activation. How to bring back these patterns? Do we create like a handbook like for teachers or like that, or do we go like even a step further and use this lesson builder where the teacher types in his requirements and then gets like a description, or maybe even find ready to use learning packages he can import in a Moodle platform, for example, no? or in a handbook, as I said before. Well, that's our ideas actually, and initial work on the pattern thing. And I would like to thank you for your attention. And what you see here is the beautiful Karlsruhe Palace. In the summertime, there are always like the Lichtfestspiele, a light festival, where they spot different animations on the castle at the palace at night. with music and so on, and you can sit here in front of the palace and grab some drink or ice cream and have a good time in Karlsruhe. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay, so thanks for the presentation. So we do have enough time for questions. So are there any questions in the audience? Maybe while you're thinking about questions. So Indico is an ongoing project, as I understand it. When do you expect to have first results? So when do we expect to have a handbook or something else?
Yeah. Basically, some first results are already here. We have some indications of the data not being collected in the teaching field. Some first indications of that. But so it's like a parallel thing we are working. At the same time, we are developing this data structure and this entry. But at the same time, we collect the data, and looking at the data, we can have some indicate. We see some indicators what's going on there. But we. The goal is to bring this all in this systematical data structure, and this the project goes until end of next year, and I think, we're on a good path now to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Questions from the audience? So still thinking. There was another thing that I was pondering about. So when going back to your taxonomy. So, well, you have more or less, yes, right. So here more or less you had the basis, and then an influence to some, well, attitude, skills, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, but probably I overlooked it. Where is the teacher?
The teacher
because
as itself, like as
because
person?
The teacher definitely has influence onto the left side here.
Great question. And where did you see that? I mean, the teacher is characterized here, actually.
Still here, okay.
It's like, because all the things go back to the teacher's operation, how he works. How would you characterize the teacher?
Well, so probably I missed it, but the issue is that you said, so you're looking for influences between these two sides. So you said that there is this left side and the right side, so a source and then an effect, or cause and an effect. And so you do have knowledge here, for example. You do have attitudes here. And we know from studies that the teacher has a lot of influence onto attitudes and knowledge and so on, right? So basically, teacher is a very important factor during teaching. So I would expect to have it here also on the right side, yeah? Or at least probably as a third party here, right?
So not just a teacher's competences we collect here in teaching,
right.
but
the
more like
motivation.
A characterization of the teacher. But I'm wondering how this could look like now, how to characterize a teacher.
Okay.
Like
I'm not in the project.
Yeah,
so
prefer teaching styles, for example.
Yeah, teaching styles, but it's also the own motivation of the teacher, the mood of the teacher, and so on.
But this is also actually part of our questionnaires to self-report teachers. How, when we distribute questionnaires, we distribute to the students, and to the teachers, and teachers self-report that. How they felt, and we also collected in interviews, for example, no?
So please take the microphone so that we can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, we have it in the interviews, and of course also in the evaluation sheets. They are also a part of teacher. It's not mentioned here, but we focus on the teacher as well.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any other questions? Not yet. What else did I wrote? So sorry.
Thank you. I just want to say that the point where you examined the cinematic data mining and applied to teaching scenarios was highly interesting, because they are totally different topics. And for me, it was very funny or not funny, but very interesting and exciting to hear that you connected these very unrelated topics in the field of data mining and pattern mining. That was very cool. I found it so interesting.
Teaching, yeah. Thank
So
you.
it's not a question itself, but it was a point which was the most exciting and interesting thing in the whole context, because it was so far away related, but the design and the process itself fits so well in both contexts.
Okay, thanks for the comment. Any other comments? Yeah. So okay. Then I also want to go back to the beginning of your presentation, and so you had this. Well, you put these pictures into my mind where you said that a teacher in mathematics would use a tablet, an iPad differently than a teacher from geography or history. How could these patterns look like? So do you have any ideas?
Sure. So if you go, for example, physics example and history example, no? They for sure use different. A physics teacher may use measuring data from some instrument to analyze it with an iPad. And the history teacher maybe does some research in sources to see, to look at sources from old newspapers and so on. They're different use now. But maybe there's like a level beyond this actual using in content of the iPad, beyond it, like more from the methodological perspective, no? To see how do they approach integrating iPads. For example, maybe both teachers integrate iPads in a certain phase of during a semester in a lesson. No? Maybe this is then a similarity. No? And if we find out that the similarity is using iPads in a certain knowledge phase and semester phase during certain styles as lesson formats, this in both led to high activation. No? Then this is a similarity of two subjects. No? We still don't know if this is a correlation, but maybe it's a first indicator. No? This is what I meant before. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Again. Okay, Stefan.
Thank you for a very interesting talk, also from my side. I would have a question concerning the two projects. I think the first thing from your PhD, you also already defined some patterns. Am I right here? But these were, let's say, offline or non-digital patterns, right?
These were out of practice. I was for 10 years a computer science teacher in Vienna, and I have a lot of practice experience, and I explore, I created these patterns and then validated them empirically. No? There was like a bottom-up approach. No? So like from out of my experience, they were developed. No? To see, I actually described how I am teaching, no? In a pattern network. No?
So did you do a comparison maybe between digital pattern for digital instructional design and non-digital?
Like emerging patterns from experience and like this and comparing to this approach, creating a taxonomy and put. No, but that's actually a great research question. No?
Okay. Yep. Maybe an interesting thing would also be where it differs, where are some similarities and so on.
It would be actually quite interesting, because if you look at our different subjects at the university, they could also try to create just from their experience patterns in digital teaching, and then compare that with a data-driven generation of patterns. This is actually a great idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
Okay, thanks for the question. Any other questions? Yes, sure.
Are you looking for a cluster like all the geography or history and math and physics and chemistry, so like the MINT facts and so do you cluster for the subjects intern too?
We do not it now, but once we have the data in the database, we can do it.
Okay, thanks again for the question. Okay, so.
Yeah, it would be interesting actually. To find out.
Okay, so still a bit of time for questions. Again, while you're thinking. So you know that I'm really a fan of your pattern idea. The reason is that well, I'm also a software engineer, and patterns, they save our lives, basically, to my opinion at least. And 6 years ago, we were talking also about anti-patterns. Maybe you remember. So because now you're looking for these positive cases, right? So where things really go well in schools, or during teaching. But now you're collecting a lot of data, and you should also have now the possibility to answer whether there are also anti-patterns or patterns of bad teaching, right?
That's so interesting that you mention it, no? Because it was like a couple of days ago we talked about the anti-patterns. We were talking about what we do not find any good practices. No? Then we said, okay, then we find anti-patterns. No? Again, currently we are actually not looking specifically to anti-patterns, but we prepare us to deal with anti-patterns, and of course you need them. Actually, you're completely right to support the patterns, then to see what's the contrast, what's the opposite of that. It's still present. Yeah,
it's still present. Okay, that's great. Okay, okay. So last chance for questions. So if there aren't any questions, then, well, let's say thanks again to our presenter. Thanks a lot. And also thank you to the audience. Thank you for coming to Klagenfurt. And thank you to the friends of the technical faculty who sponsored that event. And yeah, so with these words, I would say we can close the session. And the plan is now, of course, to show you our department. And not only the department, but we want to also give you some insight into our Informatik Werkstatt. Yeah, and well, maybe Stefan also wants to talk about his project. So if you have time, I think it would be very interesting. But thanks again for coming, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.